But by what transmission mechanism can the ECB's QE translate into higher renovation and construction?
I mean, that's what I mentioned when I said we expect the confidence of the private consumers to rise. What's also shown in the economic sentiment index, which was announced yesterday, which shows a 4-year high. That's certainly one point. And of course, we expect that if liquidity is put into the market, private households will need the money to build houses.
How sensitive is the cost structure to changing energy prices?
You meant to energy prices?
Yeah, I mean the energy feedstock into the production of the products that the company produces. How sensitive is the cost to, for example, an increase or a decrease in the energy cost?
Energy costs make up 10% of total cost of Wienerberger's cost structure. So there's some kind of sensitivity, of course, to energy costs.
Maybe looking at the leverage, I noticed that on one of the slides, you go from a debt situation to basically zero debt, so they're paying down all the debt. Is that what's your thought on that strategically? Is there a need for zero debt? Could they use the money better otherwise? What's the thinking there?
No, I mean, it's the net debt doesn't go to zero, but they're reducing the debt considerably over the next years. But this is the information the company states. So they say they will concentrate on paying down debt in the next years. They have high debt levels due to a number of acquisitions, primarily before the financial crisis. And now they don't want to use the free cash flows for acquisition, for example. And they also only plan to pay out between 10% and 30% of their free cash flow as dividends. So they will focus on paying down debt, and this is how we got to that number.
Do you think that's the right thing for the company to do, or would you prefer to see them engage in more acquisitions and further expansion?
I mean, if you look at the peers in the building materials sector, Wienerberger has clearly a higher leverage than them. So I think it's a good thing that they're reducing the debt. But as they have done in the past 3 years, so expanding into renovation and infrastructure, I think that's a very good step to get away from this very cyclical bricks business. And they just made a further acquisition this year, also towards renovation. So reducing that is definitely a good idea.
Do you have a breakdown of their expenses and costs? I mean, it's obviously an energy-intensive business to produce, bricks and tiles and so on. I'm quite surprised it's only 10% in terms of energy costs.
Well, yes, the costs that you mean are our costs of goods sold, but it has to be mentioned, and I mentioned it in the analysis, Wienerberger works with a high operating leverage, and a certain breakdown of revenue, of costs, we didn't get the information from the company, and the company doesn't list that information, but as you can see, the costs of goods sold are very high, and that's because of the high operating leverage. But for the future, due to higher utilization of plants, Wienerberger is in a position to profit from this kind of situation.
And in terms of the processes used, have they, I mean, the technology they use to produce their products, is it all electricity sort of based? Are they all electrical?
No, a brick is fired in a kiln. It's with fire. It's not with electricity.
So they use gas as well.
Yes, they also use gas. So the production, I would like to elaborate a little bit on production process, which mainly consists of 3 steps. That's the first step is the excavation process of clay, where experienced geologists need to determine the quality of the raw materials. The next step would be the mixture of the raw materials, and the third step would be the mechanical process, where really a lot of energy is needed, of course, to produce the brick, to burn the brick, to press the brick, and to dry the brick.
Who are the shareholders?
Wienerberger has just one key shareholder, and it has been noted that Wienerberger is a nearly 100% free float company. The company owns just 0.5% treasury shares, and the main shareholder group comes from the US, followed by Austrian and UK investors.
And the US investor is a mutual fund, or is it another type of investor?
No, this is not a single investor. It's a lot of retail investors.
Maybe a question on utilization rates. You indicated that utilization rates are low today, and that's why they can improve margins, and that's why also capex is low at the moment. How many years can they keep up with this situation until there's no room to improve, and until then capex also needs to go up and depress maybe cash flows?
Okay. One reason why the capex needs to be low compared to depreciation is because of the high depreciation, because of the acquisitions they made. As you can see on the slide, from 2005 to 2008, they invested heavily, and they assume, so they are at the utilization rate of approximately 60% now, and they expect in a normalized market to be at 80%, and they said that would require a capex of around 160 million.
You mentioned some concerns about using multiples to value the stock. Why were you concerned?
There are a number of issues, and the first I would like to mention is that the BRICS markets especially is comprised of family-owned businesses, so they're not listed. And we took peers from the materials, from the building materials sector, but they're not really comparable to Wienerberger, because either they're not selling the same products or they're not the same size. Also, the growth rates vary widely within the industry, and with some other multiples, there are other issues. For example, the PE multiple. Wienerberger is at a very depressed earnings level, so you wouldn't get any useful results. And for the sales or book multiples, the problem is that Wienerberger is from margin-wise, they're not as good as the other peers. So this using these multiples also leads to share prices that are not realistic.
Do you have any information on insider transactions on the stock?
No.
I would like to add that Wienerberger confirms with the corporate governance codex and was one of the first companies in Austria to comply with the Austrian corporate governance codex, and of course prohibits insider trading internally. We perceive Wienerberger's corporate governance to be top-notch.
I was not referring to insider trading, obviously, but to transactions from senior officers or board members, which have to be published. Do you have this information? Are they buying or selling the stock?
Neither.
Okay.
What are ceramic pipes used for?
The ceramic pipes.
Okay. So ceramic pipes are mostly used for wastewater and fresh water supply.